The morning I found out my daughter-in-law had been forging my name, I was sitting in the waiting room at St. Joseph's Hospital in Hamilton, holding a paper cup of tea that had gone cold an hour ago. I wasn't there for myself. I was waiting while my son had a follow-up scan on his knee. A routine thing, nothing serious, he'd said on the phone. "Come with me, Mom. Keep me company." So I had driven 40 minutes in the November rain, found parking on the street because the lot was full, and sat in that plastic chair reading a 2-year-old copy of Maclean's without taking in a single word. That's when the woman sat down beside me. She was older than me, I think. Early 70s, maybe. Silver hair cut close, a camel-colored coat that had been expensive once. She smelled like lavender and something else, something familiar I couldn't name. She didn't look at me right away. She set her purse on her lap and folded her hands over it and stared straight ahead at the wall, where a poster about hand washing had been taped slightly crooked. I don't know why I noticed her. You notice people when you're anxious and trying not to be. After a few minutes she turned and looked at me. Not a glance, a full look like she was trying to place me or decide something. "You're Elaine's mother-in-law," she said. Not a question. I felt something move through me, some animal thing, before I even had time to think. "I'm sorry? Your son is Kevin." She said it quietly, evenly. "And your name is, you go by Bea, I think." "My name is Beatrice. I have gone by Bea since I was 4 years old. My late husband called me Bea. My friends call me Bea. My son calls me Mom." I had never seen this woman before in my life. "Who are you?" I asked. She reached into her purse and took out a plain white envelope, letter-sized, unsealed. She held it out to me. "You should read this before you leave today," she said. "Not here. Somewhere private. But today." I didn't take it right away. I'm 67 years old and I grew up in Brantford and I was raised to be polite, but I'm not foolish. "I don't understand what this is." "I know you don't." Her voice was calm. Not unkind. "I'm a retired paralegal. I worked for your husband's lawyer for 11 years before I left. What's in that envelope? I've been holding it for 8 months trying to decide what to do with it. I'm sorry it took me this long." I took the envelope. She stood up, buttoned her coat, picked up her purse. "Your husband was a good man," she said. "He would want you to know." And she walked out through the sliding doors into the gray November morning, and I never saw her again. I put the envelope in my coat pocket. My son came out 20 minutes later, limping slightly, cheerful, talking about the scan and how the physiotherapist had said his recovery was ahead of schedule. I nodded and smiled and said the right things. We went to the Tim Hortons across the street, and I had a coffee I didn't taste. He talked. I listened. I kept my hand in my coat pocket, with my fingers against the envelope, the whole time. I had been a widow for 14 months. My husband, Robert, had died the previous September. Heart attack. He was 69, still working part-time as an estimator for a construction firm. Still playing hockey on Wednesday nights with men half his age. Still the person I called when I didn't know what to do about anything. He was gone in 4 hours from the first symptom to the last breath, and I had not yet, 14 months later, fully understood that he wasn't coming back. We had built a life together. 41 years. The house in Ancaster paid off. The cottage up near Perry Sound, 3 hours north, on a lake that Robert had loved since his own childhood. A modest RRSP, a small pension from his years in the trades, some savings. Not wealthy by any measure, but solid. Enough. We had planned to spend our retirement between the house and the cottage, to finally take that trip to Scotland. Robert had always talked about, to be grandparents properly, if and when that time came. My son was our only child. He was 38, worked in IT, lived with his wife in Oakville. They had been married 5 years. I had tried from the beginning to have a real relationship with her. I had tried. I want to be honest about that because it matters for what comes later. She was not a warm person. That isn't a crime. Some people are reserved, private, and that's fine. But there was something in the way she looked at our house, our cottage, the way she asked questions about Robert's pension and the property value, and whether we had a financial advisor. Questions that felt more like inventory than conversation. Robert had noticed it too. He never said much. He was a man who gave people the benefit of the doubt. But once, not long before he died, he'd said to me, quietly, over coffee one morning, "I'm not sure she sees us as family, Bea. I think she sees us as an estate." I had told him he was being unfair. I had told him she was just practical, that her own family had struggled financially and she was cautious about money, the way people who've been poor often are. He'd nodded and let it go. I thought about that conversation every day after he died. I did not open the envelope at Tim Hortons. I drove home in the rain and sat in my car in the driveway for 10 minutes before I went inside, and then I sat at the kitchen table under the good light, and I opened it. There were 3 pages, photocopies, slightly crooked, like they'd been scanned in a hurry. The first was a document I recognized. It was a transfer request for the cottage property, the lake property near Perry Sound. I had signed a version of this. 8 months ago, shortly after Robert died, my daughter-in-law had brought over some paperwork. Said my son's lawyer had recommended we formalize some things for estate purposes, simplify the transfer of assets to avoid probate complications. I was still barely functioning. I signed where she pointed. I barely read it. The document in my hands was not what I had signed. I could see it. Or I thought I could see it, but I'm not a lawyer, and I didn't want to trust myself, so I read it 3 times. The transfer of the cottage, in the version I was looking at, did not go into a family trust as I had been told. It transferred directly into my daughter-in-law's name alone, not my son's name. Hers. The second page was a bank document, a joint account that Robert and I had maintained at TD, a savings account we hadn't touched in years, holding just over $40,000 that Robert had set aside quietly over decades, money he called the just-in-case fund. I had not touched it since he died. I had assumed it was still there. According to the document in my hands, a signature to withdrawal had been made 7 months ago. The account had been closed. The third page was a handwritten note, 2 paragraphs, in handwriting I didn't recognize. It explained that the writer, the woman from the waiting room, I understood, had been asked by my son's lawyer, some months before Robert's death, to prepare erklik dokumenten, that she had grown uncomfortable with what she was being asked to do, that she had made copies before she left her position, that she was sorry she hadn't acted sooner. At the bottom she had written, "The signature on the withdrawal form is not yours. I processed enough of your husband's paperwork over the years to know your signature. That is not it." I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. Outside, the November rain had turned to sleet. It ticked against the window over the sink. The kitchen looked the way it always looked. Robert's old coffee mug still on the second shelf, where I couldn't bring myself to move it. The calendar on the wall still showing September because I hadn't changed it, the small things of a life that had been interrupted. I thought about calling my son. I picked up my phone and put it down 4 times. The 5th time I picked it up, I called my oldest friend instead. Her name is Winsome, and we have been friends since we were both young mothers in the same mother and baby group in 1987. She is from Barbados originally, has lived in Hamilton for 35 years, and she is the kind of person who listens first and talks second, which is rarer than it should be. I told her everything on the phone, all of it. She was quiet the whole time. When I finished, she said, "Don't call your son tonight." "Why not?" "Because you don't know yet how much he knows." That stopped me. I had been assuming. I realized I had been assuming that my son was innocent in this, that his wife had done this without his knowledge around him, that she was the one. But Winsome was right to slow me down. I didn't know. Robert had said, "I think she sees us as an estate." He hadn't said anything about our son. "You need a lawyer," Winsome said, "tomorrow morning, before you talk to anyone." I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the bed that Robert and I had shared for 31 years in that house, and I stared at the ceiling, and I went back through everything. Every signature I had given after he died, every document. The afternoons my daughter-in-law had come over with folders and sat at this same table and pointed and said, "Just here, just initial here. The lawyer needs this for the estate." I had trusted her because she was family, because my son loved her, because I was 66 years old and newly widowed and running on 4 hours of sleep and grief that felt like something physical pressing on my chest, and I had not read what I signed. I thought about the cottage. Robert's father had built the original cabin up there in 1962. Robert had spent every summer of his childhood on that lake. We had rebuilt the cabin into a proper cottage in the 90s. 4 weekends of hard work, friends helping, the smell of fresh lumber and wood stain, Robert sunburned and happy. We had taken our son there every summer of his life. He had learned to swim in that lake. He had caught his first fish off that dock. I thought, she took that. She is trying to take that. And then I thought, did he know? The lawyer I found was a woman named. Her practice name is on a card I still have. I will call her the lawyer because she has asked me not to use her name publicly, and I respect that. She came recommended by a woman at my church who had used her in a difficult estate matter. I called at 8 in the morning when the office opened, and I had an appointment by 10. I brought the envelope. I brought every document I could find from the months after Robert's death. I sat across from her desk, and I laid it all out. She asked me questions. Careful, specific questions. She did not react visibly to much, which I found reassuring rather than cold. This was not the first time someone had sat across from her with a story like this. At the end of the first meeting, she said, carefully, "The signature discrepancy is significant if it can be established. The property transfer has some irregularities I want to look at more closely. The bank matter, that's potentially more serious. I'd like you to request your complete account history from TD and bring it to our next meeting. What are we talking about, if this is what it looks like?" She folded her hands on the desk. Potentially forgery, potentially fraud. Depending on what the bank documents show, potentially elder financial abuse, which is a specific category under Canadian law and is taken seriously. She paused. I want to be careful not to get ahead of what the evidence shows. But yes, this is serious. I drove home and sat in my car again. I had a habit of sitting in my car before I went inside. The car felt like neutral ground, not quite out in the world, not quite home, a small in-between space. I thought about my son. I loved my son. He had been a sweet boy, quiet, bookish, the kind of child who brought home injured birds and cried at movies. He was still that person underneath, I thought. I believed that. But he was also 48 years old. I keep saying 38. He's 40. I correct myself. A grown man with his own loyalties and his own blind spots, and a wife he had chosen. And I did not know yet what he knew. I was going to have to find out. He called me 4 days later. Not about any of this. I hadn't spoken to him since the day at the hospital. He called to say they were coming to Hamilton for dinner. Could they come? Saturday? His wife wanted to talk to me about the cottage. They were thinking about winterizing it, doing some work on it, and wanted to know if I had preferences before they started planning. I sat very still with the phone in my hand before they started planning. The cottage that was, as far as they believed I knew, now in her name. I said yes, Saturday. Come for dinner. I'll make a roast. Then I called my lawyer and told her what was happening. She said, do not confront them. Do not let on. Just observe. Listen, I said. All right, she said. This is going to be hard. I know, I said. I've been through hard things. They arrived at 6. My daughter-in-law was wearing a new coat, expensive-looking, gray wool. My son hugged me at the door the way he always did, slightly too brief, slightly distracted. They came in and stood in the hallway and looked at the house the way people look at something they're already measuring. I had made pot roast with root vegetables and Yorkshire pudding, the meal Robert had always asked for on his birthday. I don't know why I chose it. Some kind of private marking of something. We ate. We talked about ordinary things, their drive up, the traffic on the QEW, my son's knee, a neighbor's renovation. My daughter-in-law was pleasant. She is always pleasant in a way that costs her nothing. I watched her across the table, and I thought about the documents in my lawyer's office, and I ate my pot roast, and I said nothing. After dinner, she brought it up herself. We've been thinking about the cottage, she said. She had a way of saying things that was very smooth, like she'd rehearsed it just enough. Now that things have settled a bit, we'd love to start using it more, maybe do some updates. The dock needs work, and the heating system is old. I said. We were thinking, she said, about whether you might want to simplify things further. With the house, just so everything is clear going forward. My son was looking at his coffee cup. Simplify, I said. Just for estate purposes, to avoid complications later. The way we did with the cottage. I looked at my son. He did not look up. That sounds like something to discuss with my lawyer, I said. The silence that followed was brief but very full. Of course, she said, after a moment, still smooth, still pleasant. Whenever you're ready. My son looked up then. He looked at me for a moment, just a moment, and something moved across his face that I have thought about many times since. It wasn't guilt, exactly. It was something more complicated. Something like knowing that a thing is wrong and having chosen, already, to look away from it. That look told me what I needed to know. I will not describe the legal process in detail because it took almost a year and was not simple. I will say that the forensic document examiner confirmed that the signature on the bank withdrawal form was not mine. I will say that the property transfer was found to have procedural irregularities that, combined with the other evidence, formed the basis of a civil fraud claim. I will say that the matter was eventually settled outside of court, because these things usually are, and that the cottage came back to me, and the bank funds, minus what had already been spent, were partially recovered. I will say that my son did not fight the settlement. I don't know how to characterize that. I'm still not sure if it means he had a conscience that won out, or if it means he knew the evidence was too strong, or both. Perhaps both. People are complicated. My son is complicated. He is still my son. We do not have a relationship now. I left the door open. I told him, through my lawyer, that I was not closing that door, but he has not come through it. That is his choice to make. I have learned, at 67, that you cannot make someone choose you. You can only decide what you will accept and what you will not. I have not forgiven him yet. I don't say that with bitterness. I say it because it's true and because I think honesty is more useful than performance. Forgiveness, if it comes, will come slowly and on its own schedule. I'm not rushing it. The cottage is mine. I drove up there last July by myself, first time since the summer before Robert died. I took the long way, through Barry, the way we always went, because Robert liked the stretch of highway where you could see the edge of the shield coming up, the land changing, the rock breaking through. I unlocked the front door, and it smelled like must and wood, and the particular stillness of a place that has been waiting. I opened all the windows. I made tea on the old propane stove. I took my mug out to the dock, and I sat in the Muskoka chair that had been there so long its legs had left impressions in the boards. The lake was the same. Lakes don't change the way people do. The same small waves, the same way the light moved across the water in the afternoon. The same loons somewhere out of sight calling to each other across the distance. I sat there for a long time. I thought about the woman in the waiting room. I had hired a private search after everything was over. Not to pursue her, just to thank her. I wanted to thank her. My lawyer had made some inquiries. We found a name, an address in Dundas, a retired paralegal who had worked for an estate law firm. I wrote her a letter. I don't know if she received it. I never heard back. I think about her sometimes. How she had been holding what she knew for 8 months and couldn't let it go. How she had recognized me in that waiting room. From documents, from Robert's file, from photographs, maybe, and had made a decision in those few minutes while I sat there reading a magazine I wasn't reading. How she had walked out into the November rain after and not looked back. She gave me my life back, not the life I had before. That's gone, and I know it. Robert is gone, and that doesn't change, and the version of the future we planned together doesn't exist anymore. But she gave me back the foundation of what I had left. The house, the cottage, the just-in-case money that had been meant as a cushion against hard times. She made it possible for me to not be a woman whose grief was used against her. I don't know how to account for that kind of grace from a stranger. I don't have the words for it. I'm 67 years old, and I've been to church most of my life, and I still don't fully have the words. The loons called again, somewhere out on the water. The sun was getting low. I picked up my mug and went inside to start supper, and for the first time in a very long time, I was glad to be there.